Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Quantum Compass. This is episode number 6. I'm one of your co-hosts for today, David Fowle, and as always, I'm joined by
Bella Alvaran. Hi, everybody.
So, hopefully, you've been getting into the flow of the previous episodes we've done in the WaveSpells and starting to see how these things are mapping out and flowing from one to the next. Now, this next WaveSpell, I would dare to suggest, is perhaps one of the most important ones that we're going to come across, certainly in 2024, but possibly in our life even. I think it's very, very important. And today we're going to be having a look, as we always do, at the actual Mayan WaveSpell itself and in the energies of it that Bella's going to talk us through. And then we're going to get into the much more complex astrology of the next 13 days, starting on April the 8th and running through until April the 20th.
Yes, starting with a big eclipse.
Starting with a big eclipse. So good to know that I can still count between 1 and 13. It is useful in this program to be able to do that. But all joking aside, we're going to kick off really this WaveSpell of the white magnetic dog with the eclipse. And not only in the eclipse, there's also going to be a Chiron Cazimi on the eclipse, and there's also going to be a Mercury bank conjunct with Eris, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on too. So we've got quite a few things to talk about today. So this is going to be a slightly longer episode, right, Bella, because we want to try and paint for you the picture as we see it and as we have been journeying and working through over the last couple of weeks. And even on a personal level, that's enabled some messages and visions to be walked through. And of course, if you've also watched the wonderful episode from just a couple of days ago with Leslie Shankman, the Cosmic History Codes, we were looking at the cosmological or galactic aspect of this upcoming eclipse. So without any further ado, Bella, let's hand over to the Mayan in the house, and you're going to take us through the presentation in terms of the Mayan energy and this particular wave spell, right?
Right. So this wave spell is called the wave spell of the white magnetic dog, and it has to do with love and the heart. But first, the introduction for the new people. We work with the Solkin, which is the sacred Mayan calendar. And what it reminds us of is that we are a fractal of what happens in the galaxy, of the bigger cycles of life, and that our time is not linear. If we keep on thinking it's linear and we just follow the Gregorian calendar, then our reality is going to be very controlled.
Restricted.
And restricted, yeah, is the word. The 1320 frequency is the frequency of the calendar. It's a frequency that it's connected to our body, our biology, to the gestation process, to the natural cycles of life. And when we go into the actual matrix, which is a natural matrix, it's a 260 frequency combination. So when we multiply 20 times 13, then we get the 260 energies, which are energies that happen every day. Every day has an energy equality to it. And this is also a fractal of the much bigger cycle, like the 26,000 year cycle, like we have mentioned in the course. 260 would be that fractal number. And here we have the glyph, which is the dog, the white dog. I just gave 2 examples here.
I love these new style glyphs on the right.
They're the ones for the course. They're really beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah, really cool.
And this is the white magnetic dog. The qualities of this energy, which is the one that is going to rule 13 days starting on the 8th of April, are loyalty, heart connection, spiritual strength. We're going to need a lot of that for this big eclipse coming. Yeah. Unconditional love, acceptance, honesty, transparency, devotion, relationships, not only with your partner, but relationships in general. Compassion, lots of compassion. Lots of people are going through really tough things at this moment, and we need to bring more compassion and tolerance, especially during this period of time. And we know that even though the eclipse starts on the 8th, there is a resonance of that energy for at least 6 months. The energy or the quality of the dog energy is also being in connection with your guardians, with your guides, to have a circle of friends, to have good friendships, to be authentic and having breakthroughs, especially when it comes to emotional things. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Any questions up to that?
Well, I mean, what's obvious to me, really, as the sort of the flow of the last few WaveSpells has unfolded, is that we've just come out of the red magnetic Earth, which was all about navigation. And as we invited our listeners into that space, it was really sort of what occurred to me was that it was a navigation between the eclipses. And the first one was a full moon, and it was to do with, it was in Libra, and it was to do with relationships and bringing into illumination anything that no longer is working in relationships, in dynamics, and being brave enough and strong enough to look at them. And I think that what we're constantly being asked is, are you able to step into a new aspect of yourself? And if so, what does it reveal? What aspect of your shadow it has still got to be on, has still needing to be resolved?
So talking about shadow, this is the shadow wisdom that we need to pay attention to for the WaveSpell. It's when you bring unresolved wounds to relationships. When you're still stuck in emotional pain because you haven't dealt with your programming, with your bioshocks, to still be stuck in some kind of physical pain, which is also reflecting something that you haven't understood or dealt with. Issues with being possessive, being jealous, any kind of emotional drama. And the feeling of feeling unsupported is also part of the shadow work that we can do over these next 13 days. The transformation for these would be to recognize those blockages and imbalances, lots of self-love, to even embody love. And not in the cheesy way, but just to understand that love is that energy that glues everything together. We're all part of the same thing. So just to be tolerant and very compassionate. To free yourself from any drama, go to the root cause of the issues. Normally, this takes you back to the early years of your life. So if you still haven't looked there, please go and revisit that. There may be some treasures there to be uncovered. And more than anything, reconnect with your guides. We all have our higher self, we all have our inner guidance, but we also have some helpers, and it's good to learn to reconnect with them.
Right, and so I'm just going to ask you to go back a couple of slides and show the image of the body where the glyphs are marked out, because I found that super interesting. And somebody on a recent video commented about this is all wonderful information in relation to cosmic stars and everything else, but how do I relate it to myself? And that's often something I've seen on many astrological videos and channels. And sometimes people find some of this more esoteric information that's coming more to light now a little too abstract or beyond themselves.
Right.
And somebody said, well, how do I relate it to myself? So I'm just going to give a clear example from my own perspective, a very recent one. My glyph is the Skywalker, which is number 13. And where does that relate to on the body, Bella?
It's on the left ankle,
and
on the left foot.
Where is the most damage from my accident? Is on my left ankle. So what that tells me is that this, even though seemingly is an accident and many other things, of course, nothing is an accident. In the world of Buddhism that I come from, everything is cause and effect, and one thing leads to another. And I definitely, in the process, in the run-up to the accident, asked Great Spirit to reveal to me anything that no longer served me, anything that still needed to be fixed. Lo and behold, something needed to be fixed in my left ankle. So that tells me at this level, just to make it personal, that actually what was really preventing me from being the truest aspect of myself, of being the glyph number 13 of the Skywalker, which is about bringing heaven 5D down to earth 3D, was something that was damaged in my left ankle. Now that in itself is a story for another time, because it's quite a long story, but that's how I learned that this process was something not just actually incredible, but actually really beautiful, and was going to assist me in becoming something much more than I already was. A painful one for sure, but still it's what I asked for and it's what showed up. So I have to trust that this is something that is meant to happen and actually is beneficial for me.
So what the way you refer this to yourself is that we all have one of those 20 energies and one of those numbers or tones. And depending on the number, it will affect a certain part of your body. And it's like the body reminding you, okay, there is something there that you still haven't looked at. And the amount I do consultations and readings, and every time I ask the person, you know, have you had any issues in this part of your body? And normally there is something, because there has been a reminder there, like poking you, you know, remember to do this. You haven't looked into that.
So I just wanted to share that, partly because it's very present for me, but also because, you know, part of what I perceive as my own role in doing these videos is to share from my own personal experiences. And being so psychic and empathic, I tend to feel everything quite succinctly. And so if I'm able to communicate that in an everyday way, then hopefully it will show many of you how this stuff becomes something that's not just a great video to sit and listen to while you're having a cup of tea or your dinner or something, but to actually bring it into you and say, hold on a second, what's the number of my glyph and where does that relate to in my body? And heck, hold on a second, did I have something happen to there a few years ago, or what's that all about? And that will open a doorway for you then to really be able to utilize the energies coming up on the eclipse, which of course, as we've already alluded to, is also a Chiron Cazimi. Yeah. And what is Chiron really about? It's about the revelation and release of our deepest traumas and wounds so that they can be brought into the light and transformed.
For full healing.
For full healing, not just in this time-space continuum, but whatever time-space continuum our soul is existing on, which is multiple ones. And, you know, once you do more of this kind of timeline healing work, you will realize that there are other aspects of you in parallel timelines that are also suffering some kind of trauma that is resonant in this one. Now, this is where the work with some of the sacred plants can come in useful, that can take us into those realms, but that's not really the context of this particular show. But these are some of the examples about how we can start to take this information that Bella is sharing from the Mayan world, but also from the astrological world, but also from the plant world too, and we can bring it into a place of the now, so that we can see what is going on for us now. Not what is going on tomorrow, what happened yesterday, but what is going on now. And whatever is going on now is probably the most important thing you should be dealing with, because the only thing that really exists is now. So
good. So this is the WaveSpell for those next 13 days. We start here on the 8th of April with the white dog, 9th, 10th, 11th, and so forth. This day, the 12th of April, is also quite important. We're going to talk about it. It's the white wizard, which has been the energy of the whole year. Yes. And what I like people to do is I think is one of the most important points this year, one of the most intense astrologically, and this WaveSpell is a reflection of that. But what he's saying to us is there is love there that we can actually, that is going to support us. So it's a new moon, and you should also bring some of the intention. So on the solar eclipses, normally the ancient Mayans and different cultures have understood that unhelpful energies can get through because there is less light. And so we want to be more aware of these and be able to do, to use love, you know, the alchemy of the heart. We want to be in our hearts, visualizing what we want for ourselves and for the whole planet, for everybody, for the good of all. So we want to be bringing a lot of this white, bright light. It's what my idea is.
Right, exactly. And as we get through this show, we're going to start to bring in some ideas about where we're putting our attention and intention for the eclipse. Because, you know, look, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of fear-mongering going on. And we're going to also look at some of the other pieces that are going on that seem to be part of the chaos and discord energy that are seemingly wanting to be sown. Now, we can understand that that could be a little scary for some people out there, but at the end of any era or epoch, there has to be a certain amount of chaos so that the phoenix can rise from the flames. And unfortunately, that gives rise to many people going into a place of fear. And for sure, our job is not to fearmonger. I've heard other channels out there also having to tackle difficult aspects of what is going on in our reality. And God bless them, because I think that they're doing a difficult job and taking flack from some of their audience. Mm-hmm. Our job is to give a more spiritual overtone or perspective, working with the cosmology, the Mayan time aspect, the plants, and the astrology, to show how we can work with the energies at a more magical, even wizard-like, alchemical level, so that we have nothing to be afraid of. In fact, quite the opposite. We can be in a place of absolute trust and surrender, because we've called in the most appropriate things according to our divine destiny. You think about it, you can't really go too badly wrong when you're working with your divine destiny, unless you go into the world of free will, and then you can get yourself into a little bit of trouble.
Well, we need to understand we are co-creating all of this. But if our mind is being distracted or into the other calendar, the Gregorian calendar, or distracted by the news, by the warmongering and all of the horrible things that they're pushing out there, then you're going to be off your center, and you're going to help co-create those realities. So you need to be able to step out of that and just intend from your heart, what do I want for me and for my world? How do I want my world to be?
Beautiful. And again, I'm going to refer back to the Cosmic History Codes episode, so we don't repeat too much of the stellar nations in this video, but that work, we believe, sits very much alongside what we are doing here, and it gives the macro aspect of the micro, which is really important, because we're down here in the 3D body, having the micro experience, which is what one of the smaller calendars, the Solkin, is able to help us with. But then there's these much bigger calendars, right, Bella, which are linked to the cosmological cycles of our DNA and our soul, and the fact that we're eternal beings and have been for quite a long time, right? Probably eternity, in fact, somehow. So, you know, our soul has been up to many, many things, and we sometimes get restricted down into this very narrow perception of ourselves that is just 3D and only 3D. And when we do that, we shut ourselves off to the possibility, first of all, of magic, but also the rest of ourselves. And I think that that's really what this whole process is about, is the great remembrance of who we truly are and accepting who we truly are in our wonder, our greatness, and our glory. And that's not an ego thing. It's just accepting and receiving that information. And once we get our fields aligned and clear and free of all of the traumas, which is really what this eclipse is also giving us an opportunity to do, and we'll get into the dynamics of that in just a second. We are being given this wonderful opportunity, or even invitation from Great Spirit, to say, hey, this is it, guys. This is a powerful moment. We're going to open a portal. Many things can come through, which we'll talk about, of varying persuasions, but again, it's only within duality. And really, what is the point here is to get beyond duality to the eagle's perch, non-dual awareness, 5D, or you could say heaven, depending on your religious perspectives. But we'll get into that in a little bit more. What have you got for us here, Bella?
Right, just a reminder that time is the evolution of consciousness and time is art. So every wave spell intend to create something beautiful, something that comes from your skills, your talents, something that you want to share with the world. And especially in this one, you should be able to bring something that it's to share with everybody else, because we are all connected and we're all in this together, basically. So we want to do something for everybody.
And I just love this quote that I know we've shared a few times. Maybe you just want to repeat it, from the wonderful Jose Arguelles, Bella.
Who owns your time, owns your mind. Own your own time and you will know your own mind. It's a really good quote.
I think it's a really good quote, and I think it's really, really important to have as a mantra every day. And I know that you've gone into this in your Mind, Time and Magic course, exploding the myths around different calendars, and also looking at where timeline splicing has occurred. And what we're really understanding from doing that course is that time is not linear at all. It's a series of stitched together components that actually have been using eclipses to bring through new timelines. Sounds far out, and of course we don't have the memory of them happening to us because they've been erased, but what we're starting to remember at the soul level, because we can see it in the Akashic records and the ethos, is like, oh my gosh, this really is just a series of stitching or splicing, we can say, which is very commensurate at the micro level of the splicing of our DNA, which of course is another story for another podcast. And there are a number of people out there looking into what has been going on over the last few years, but also what has happened to us as beings in regards to our DNA, and again point towards the wonderful Stellar Nations pathway and the story of the cosmic humans and how we got to be in this predicament in the first place. But that's a story for another time.
I think the reminder here is that whoever owns your time will create your reality. So just try to switch the belief of, oh, time is money or time is something else, to time is art, and take control of your time, because that's how you can create your reality, basically.
Right, and you know, just pointing towards Greenwich Mean Time, the British Empire, you can start to see how time has been controlled from one very particular point, which again Bella goes into in her course, and I think is fascinating. But now we're going to get into the astrology of what is going to happen, and we've mapped it out a couple of dates before the wave spell actually starts, because they are important. And Mercury went retrograde, I think around 27 degrees of Eris, which is the starting point of Mercury's pendulum-esque journey back, because it's in retrograde now, back to 15 degrees of Aries, and then it's going to move forwards again on April the 25th. But as it does that, it picks up a number of different messages, and also worth pointing out on April the 5th, which is just before obviously this wave spell starts, the sun is conjuncting the north node at 15 degrees of Aries, which is basically where Mercury is going to retro back to, which I also find very interesting. But it's also a similar point in the astrology looping back to July last year. So there are some interesting loops and cycles going on here, but really and truly, when we come to April the 8th, we have a number of things going on. We'll put up the chart for that in a second, but I called it a bang conjunction with Chiron, because I think it's going to be some sort of energetically a sort of a bang moment, and maybe we're not going to necessarily see anything immediately in the moment of the eclipse, but what I've been experiencing in some of the other dimensional work I've been doing, is a very much clearing of the astral planes and of the, let's just say, the forces of duality of light and dark are very much facing off against each other. And this eclipse is a pivotal moment. Now, in the world of the Mayans, as Bella has been sharing on her course, the Mayans understood that portals were something very, very important. And they went out of their way, didn't they, Bella, to make sure that we knew when they were going to happen.
Yeah, they kept track of the cycles of Venus, the cycle of Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, all the visible planets, obviously of the moon and the sun. But the eclipses were part of their calculations. So they understood they needed to prepare ahead of time because they would bring big changes depending on the energies around them.
Right. So, I mean, again, we don't want to cause any fear or in any way put people into a place of doubt about things. But what we have to understand really is that an eclipse is a portal into deep space. And that's what it is. And consequently, it can be used by the forces of light or by the forces of dark to pull stuff through. Now, when I was doing some research for this, to my surprise, over the run up to the Easter weekend, found myself feeling very much connected to the Christ consciousness. And it came to me one morning when I woke up just shortly after my surgery, that perhaps there'd been an eclipse during the crucifixion. I'd never thought about this before, but I looked it up on the internet, and lo and behold, there is some very, very strong evidence that shows that there was an eclipse at the moment of the crucifixion. So we can perhaps extrapolate lots of ideas from that, but I just want to put it into everybody's awareness because maybe something came through of the light, maybe something came through of the dark. We don't know, but we do know that the age of Pisces kicked off really with that occurrence. And what we can also see from the wonderful, if slightly gory, movie that Mel Gibson put together called Apocalypto is at the end of that movie, after there's been another total solar eclipse, is we can see that the conquistadors turn up, which then unleashed 500 years, or we can say we're still in it really, of misery, but particularly during that period of about 50 to 100 years afterwards, there was a lot of very terrible things happen, particularly to the indigenous people here in the Americas. But actually, if we go back to Europe in the old world, they were also doing the same thing. It was the time of the Inquisition and all of that. So we can understand that there was already a very strong darkness in the world. But what also happens is that these timelines are then created. And that timeline was that Columbus discovered America, which is totally ludicrous. But until very, very recently, that was still being celebrated in America on Thanksgiving Day.
People do.
Right. And, you know, and all of these things. And it's just like, think about it logically. How can it be discovered when there's already people living there?
Big civilizations, actually.
Big civilizations.
More advanced astronomically and in many other ways.
And so this has led us to think about, like, well, how many other portals have had like these stories or narrations changed? And I was watching a very interesting series about the Bible yesterday. I've got very much into this recently, questioning many things, and nobody knows who wrote the Bible. And in fact, the Bible seems to be stitched together of lots of different bits and pieces, all of which could have been deleted, inserted, deleted, inserted, a bit like creating a Word document. Right. So which version is true? The bit that you deleted out early because you didn't like it, or the bit that you finished with?
Depending on who was the ruler as well, the governments. And
so there are many variables here, and you can sit and meditate on all of this. And I actually would suggest that because it can be quite surprising once you start to question things. But we're getting a little sidetracked here because we want to look at what Mercury's up to.
Yeah.
So on the eclipse itself, we've got this really big situation happening with this portal, and we'll get to the intentions part of that. But it's also throwing light on Chiron because there's a kazimi, and that is when the sun is in alignment with any planet or asteroid, in this case Chiron. But it's also in alignment with the eclipse itself at 19 degrees and 24 minutes. So that is where this all kicks off. At the same time, by this point, Mercury's picked up a little bit of speed on its retro journey back, and it's now conjunct Eris, which I found also very, very interesting. And Eris is often referred to as the street fighter, female warrior wasn't invited to the party. That's the stock standard phrase I've heard, but is also really an energy of chaos and discord, which I found super interesting when our friend and teacher Leslie emailed me this morning, looking at what the laboratory at CERN is up to, where the Hadron Collider is, which apparently is going to get fired up on
the day of the eclipse.
The day of the eclipse. Now, I'm not sure I totally...
At the time of the eclipse.
At the time of the eclipse. Now, I'm not entirely sure I believe that it's been turned off, actually, but they're making the big news about this, and you don't have to look too far into the rabbit holes on the internet to see some very dubious things about CERN that might make you feel a little uncomfortable about why they might be firing this up on the eclipse. Now, they've called the project... no, in fact, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's another parallel project happening with NASA who want to fire missiles of some description into the eclipse. I'm not exactly sure what they're thinking or how that even works, but it makes for a good news story. But that project is under the acronym of APEP. Now, as Leslie pointed out, Apep is actually an Egyptian god of the underworld, a snake, a big snake, who brings chaos and discord at the end of every day and fights Ra. And as long as Ra wins, the sun rises in the morning and we don't live in the world of chaos, darkness, and discord. So it's an eternal battle, really. But
so they're replaying the whole story again with the sun and the snake.
With the sun and the snake. And that also then made me start to think about some of the traditions of the Norse world, which relate to Ragnarok and the Serpent of Midgard, who is another big snake who is called forth at the end of days when there is about to be a big shift. Interestingly, another one of my friends also messaged me this morning and saying, have you checked which way the water is swirling down the plug hole? It seems to be going a different way. Now, I haven't done that yet, but some people have been suggesting for a while that we've already had a pole shift on the planet. It just hasn't manifested yet into our awareness. So these are all bits of the puzzle that we're holding. We're not saying anything in particular one way or the other, but what we can really work with at the personal level is the energy of Chiron, the revelation of the deep wound. And whatever that is, I would suggest this is the best moment with the energy of the sun to bring it into your awareness, because the sun can purify and transform anything unhelpful that may be aggravating the wound. Now, from my work as a medicine person working in the astral realms, I always said that there are two aspects to a wound. First of all, there's the wound itself and how it happened. Then there is what has got implanted, attached, or is feeding on the wound itself. And those are the lower density energies that we can find in the lower astral realm. Now, whilst those things are being attached to a wound and they're manipulating, it's very difficult to heal them, which is why some people go around in healing circles for a long time, because they don't know that. However, if that space has been cleansed with fire, which is what this Cazimi is offering us, then we have a window to be able to go into our wounds free of any of these kinds of energies. Now, it requires bravery and it requires strength and courage, which is why I'd recommend working with strong trees like the oak tree to hold your space, or even working with nettle maybe. But we're also going to share some other plants later.
At the end, yeah.
But this is an opportunity to really say, okay, Spirit, I need to resolve this. It may already be in your awareness what it is, or it may be something that's even hidden from you, but this energy of the eclipse is going to illuminate that for you. It may be that the world doesn't look illuminated, but we can illuminate our inner self with this light. So that's where we kick off on April the 8th.
Let's mention the 40 days after the eclipse. I think they are very key as well.
Right. So again, many of us have been working as a team over the last few weeks, putting the pieces together from our own modalities. And it was brought into our awareness that from the April 8th eclipse to the Jupiter Cazimi that happens in May, it's exactly 40 days. Now, that's a very important number for quite a few reasons, Bella.
We're coming out of Easter, first of all.
Right.
And all the symbology around the crucifixion, the resurrection, and what happens to the 40 days of Lent. Mm-hmm.
But it's also the 40 days of the vision quest, I think, that both Jesus and John the Baptist took in the desert. And what I understand is that during those 40 days, it is important that, well, from Jesus's point of view, is that he kept out the temptations of the inverted forces. And we can say that those are like the 7 deadly sins, really, but also we can see that it, from a Buddhist point of view, it means right thoughts, right speech, and right deeds. And if we find ourselves reacting or being triggered, then we can say, oh, maybe something came out of me that I didn't want, maybe anger, maybe I thought a bad thought about somebody. Yeah. Well, in 5D consciousness, a bad thought about somebody will instantly manifest in their field as something a bit like a psychic attack, because that is the energy. It's like, oh, you were someone who's super sensitive will feel that. And do you really want to be somebody that's doing that? Maybe even to somebody you care about, but in a bad moment, you got triggered by something else. These are all of the things that we've been talking about for quite a while.
It's not the moment to be creating more karma.
Right.
We need to be able to release all of the karma. There is so much work that people have been doing. I think it's the first time in the planet that there are so many conscious beings that have done their inner work and have an open heart. And I also want to talk about Texas, because it's the place where the eclipse is going to create that cross from the previous eclipse in October. So I feel that Texas and the amount of oaks that are there, the people with big hearts, there is a big change coming to the States through the state of Texas. And I think we all want to put good intentions to whatever happens there, big hearts, and that the changes that are to come are for the good of all. more than anything.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And maybe just as a motif as we move on from the April 8th piece itself, is that if we think about the portal being able to hold the forces of light and darkness, we can see that our world is going through some big changes. And the important thing is to focus on the light. And I would suggest at this time that the most amount of light that we can call through is the Christ consciousness, so that the work of Jesus 2,000 years ago and Mary Magdalene and all of the people around him comes to its final fruition, because the age of Pisces was hijacked, possibly even by the eclipse during the so-called crucifixion. We don't know. We're just speculating at this point, but we are trying to unravel the history to understand what happened here during the age of Pisces. It wasn't meant to be like this. This was meant to be an age where we all met each other in the ocean of consciousness, and it hasn't somehow happened. It's gone a little bit awry, but it can now happen in the age of Aquarius. But in order for that to happen, there are no backseat passengers on this ride. If you want to go to New Earth, you have to be in the front seat yourself, not letting somebody else drive the car. And that also means putting your intention to what kind of future you want. It doesn't mean you have to go out and make a protest or do anything like that. You just really have to sit in meditation, particularly during the 4.5 minutes of the eclipse, and say, I'm calling now to the most appropriate, highest levels of light. And if you have allies that you want to call to, if you have beings that you work with that you know 100% are of the right frequency, call them in. The more of us that can call in the light frequencies, whatever the opponents or opposing forces in duality want to call through, will not work. It simply won't work, but it requires enough of us to have that intention in our hearts. And this is why we think it's so important on this wave spell, with it being the white magnetic dog, which is representative of the heart, because the heart is the direct conduit to 5D consciousness, where none of these pains or traumas or any of these trigger points actually exist, because it's the eagle's perch. It's non-duality. So, wow, quite a lot on April the 8th. We haven't even got to the chart yet.
I know.
So maybe we can just move on and we can pop back to this one,
Okay.
this window in a minute, Bella. So
These are the main four.
These are the main four transits that we've picked up.
Which is a lot for one wave spell. It's like the most
really
intense astrology for the whole year, probably. In
right. So let's go on to the one for the eclipse just a second, because you've highlighted here for all of you astrologers out there who'd like to look at the charts as we do, and we can see here the conjunction of Chiron and the sun and the moon, right? And we can also see the North Node is really in a slightly wide conjunction at 4 degrees, but it's also showing us that this is a beginning. It's an ending and a beginning. And me, myself, and I'm calling for the ending of the old paradigm, all of the inverted slave structures, all of the servitude that we've been in, and I'm calling for total sovereignty for myself and any other beings that wish it at this time for themselves too, because I believe that this can happen in this moment. I truly believe in all of my being that this is what we've been preparing for. Now, it may not immediately appear like that, and that's because we have Mercury conjunct Eris. And as quite a few other astrologers have said, this could be a little bit likely to hear the war drums. Maybe if it was Lord of the Rings, we might hear the drums of the orcs and the goblins in the depths of the mines of Moria, but we could hear the war drums. We may even see something on the TV, the goggle box, that looks a bit like a war situation. Again, do not buy into the illusions. We may even see something in the sky. It may be real, it may be blue beam, we don't know. The only way we can really be sure is to feel into our body medicine, which is why it's so important to be still and not to be in a place of any lower frequency stuff. During the eclipse, there are many other interesting things going on, some interesting conjunctions. I just spotted another one here. Pholus, another centaur being who gets everybody drunk at the party, conjunct with Quawa, whose energy I don't know so well, but for some of you astrologers out there, that could be interesting to look at. We also have the impending Mars-Saturn conjunction, which we'll get to shortly. But as we can see, big stellium going on here in Aries. And Aries is really all about the I am. This is all about the wounding of self, Chiron in Aries, the deepest wound that we carry, the wounded healer, the wounded warrior, and of course the wounded self.
And I think the sentence that is coming to me now is, during the period of darkness, make sure that you are the light. When the whole planet, or especially the section of the full total eclipse, during that time of darkness, you or we want to be the ones bringing all of the light that we can have or bring into the planet.
Right. So from this one, no, we've talked about it a lot. Let's just go back again to the go back to the Mercury pendulum swinging layout. Sorry. Okay.
This one?
Yeah, so now we can see Mars conjuncts Saturn at 14 degrees of Pisces, which we'll get to in a minute. But I just want to map out the rest of the Mercury journey so you can see what this is about. So Mercury, after having After meeting Eris on the day of the eclipse, it then retros back to meet the sun for a kazimi, a Mercury kazimi. So Mercury is now getting blessed also by the sun, fully cleansed and purified. And so then it continues on its journey again to meet Chiron at 20 degrees of Aries. And what I would suggest is that Mercury is now on a mission to deliver us a message. Maybe we're going to also be receiving a message from the sun itself about what is happening. The sun is also on a journey, by the way. And again, the wonderful work of Stellar Nations is really showing the journey of redemption that our sun is on as a conscious being. And I think that's really, really fascinating too. But then it also retros back and meets another character who's in the Aries stellium, which is Venus at 17 degrees of Aries on April the 19th. Is there anything you want to say about this particular conjunction, Bella?
No, it just looks like Mercury is informing the others of what's happening. He goes and has a look all the way down to the end of Aries, and then comes back and gives them the intel on, okay, we're doing it this way because there is an eclipse.
Right, exactly. So that's what Mercury is up to in this particular WaveSpell, but there's a second half of this too, which we'd already mapped out, which we'll bring into the next quantum compass. But Mercury goes stationary direct on April the 25th at 15 degrees of Aries, and then moves its journey forwards. And it's going to again meet Chiron and I guess Venus, maybe not the sun because the sun moves faster, before it then enters Taurus sometime in May. So that is, I think, the journey of communication that Mercury wants to share with us. And Mercury retrograde is often something that people get all bent out of shape over. I often see really now that retrograde processes are a chance to review something that needs to be looked at again. Did you get this the first time around, or do we need to have another look at it before we move forwards?
And for this new cycle, which we just started, the astrological year, I think it's saying make sure that you've done your healing and also include the sacred feminine, because it's what we need to bring back into our lives. We have been, and from the stories of stellar nations, we know that the goddess energy, the feminine, was left the galaxy, and it became a young galaxy, a young energy galaxy. So we want to bring back the sacred feminine and create balance of masculine feminine for this new cycle and moving forward.
Exactly. And I just wanted to pull up some other notes I had here, which was looking at the Sabian symbols for some of these moments. And the Sabian symbol for the eclipse at 19 degrees, so that's the 19 to 20 degrees Sabian symbol, a young girl feeding birds in winter. Now, we can understand that in many ways, but what came to me immediately was sustaining life by the process of giving something to something smaller than you, even not because you have to, but because you want the birds to be fed and so that they survive the winter, so that they can flourish again in the spring. Why? Because birds are important. Not only do they look great in the garden and sing beautiful songs, but actually, I think, rewiring the very fabric or the morphogenetic field around us in a micro.
And they take the seeds to different places.
That too, right? And they can also get rid of mosquitoes, which is not a bad thing. So anyway, that's the Sabian symbol for that. And now we're going to move on to the second major piece, which is a couple of days later on April the 10th.
Do you want to see the chart?
Yeah, let's have a quick look at the chart. So I have to give credit here to the wonderful astrologer Molly McCord, who I think did an amazing piece on the eclipse. And she was channeling when she was doing the piece, which I found super interesting. And she mapped out basically a second story that's running in parallel to the energy of the eclipse in Aries. And that is what Mars is up to in Pisces. Now we can say that somehow Mars and Saturn is a bit like daddy and son having a little bit of a conversation, and in Pisces it's a little bit of a watery one, so it could be a little bit emotional. It's not a natural space for either of these planets to be in, really, I would dare to suggest. But Mars has a very chameleon-like energy, I think, in Pisces, and it's very adaptable, and Saturn is here to give us structure. So I think on a positive note, we can say that this is also very much about the evolution of the divine masculine, how it's restructuring itself, how it wants to move forwards, and how it gets its emotional self under control. Because we can say perhaps in the last 2,000 years that the emotional side of the masculine has been somewhat shut down. And so we've not been able to be as in touch with that side of ourselves, which has perhaps led to the more, we can say, what's the word I'm looking for here? Not chauvinistic or misogynistic, but those kind of energies of the patriarchy of the last 2,000 years. There we go, I got there in the end. So so that kicks off on April the 10th at 14 degrees and 41 minutes. This is local time here in Pátzcuaro, Mexico. And then across the course of the next couple of weeks, Mars moves through Pisces and also has a little dalliance, we can say, with Neptune right at the end of Pisces. And Neptune actually goes up to 28 degrees and I think 59 minutes of Pisces before retroing back later this year. And it doesn't actually enter Eris until the spring. I think it's February of 2025. So it's like we almost get taken up to the edge, and then Pisces like, still some more watery stuff we have to have a look at here, some more illusion that we need to review. And I think the Neptune in Pisces is very much about the illusions, particularly around medications and those things that maybe we've been experiencing in our world over the last few years, and maybe were not for our highest good, and maybe part of a shadow plan, we can say, which is now going to get broken down, perhaps even with the more punchy energy of Mars punching through and saying, no, we're not going to accept this anymore. We're looking for something different. So again, I looked up the Sabian symbol for that, which I think is interesting, given the more Mercury Eris energy of the eclipse. And the Sabian symbol is an officer instructing his men before a simulated assault under barrage of live shells.
Sounds like false flags to me.
It sounds like false flags. It also sounds a bit like some of the operations that NATO have been planning that are supposedly a drill, but somehow the timing of it seems very inopportune, shall we say. But also, it's like, I feel like there's a con here. So there's a simulated assault, according to what the men are being told, but actually they're going under live shells. So there's a very strong chance that they might die because it's not really simulated if it's live shells. It's Pisces, what can we say? It's that kind of energy. So I'll leave you to interpret more into that one. But for me, there seems to be quite a clear message there. And I think false flags could be a part of it.
It sounds like it.
So that's the second major piece we wanted to have a look at. And well, this one comes more from the magic space. This is something that me and the astrologer Kelly Hunter discovered just over a year or so ago when we were working with the Artemisias and understanding that the Artemisia planets are quite connected to Black Moon Lilith. And what we discovered was, and you can watch the full video on the YouTube channel, but to paraphrase it, that there are moments where the true Black Moon and the mean Black Moon Lilith come together, and we call that a Black Moon Lilith flashpoint. It's a very, very precise moment, but we're likening it to something a bit like blockchain, a cosmic messaging service, which messages can be popped into and received out of. Very, very magical, very, very precise, and a way to work with astrology in a new way. However, this one comes up. I had to do a bit of rooting around on some software to get the exact moment, but from what I could tell, it's 21:25 of Virgo, and it happens here in Pátzcuaro, local time, 4:45 p.m. So I just wanted to flag that up to those people who've been listening to some of those things we've been sharing about Black Moon Lilith. But what I loved was the Sabian symbol for this one. I got into this for this episode, and that is a royal coat of arms enriched with precious stones. To me, that speaks of nobility, of heraldry, perhaps even the restoration of certain lineages, and not necessarily for power's sake, but maybe we can even say something like the Christ consciousness maybe being restored to its fullest extent, rather than the story of humble shepherds having a baby in a manger, which doesn't really fit with the history of Jesus. So again, food for thought. We're just throwing out some ideas. Bella, do you have anything? You put a wonderful picture of a cat there.
It's not a cat. It's a beautiful jaguar.
A big cat.
And that day is the day of the white wizard, or the jaguar tone in the Mayan glyphs. So it's the 5th day of the WaveSpell. It's a day where you can create magic, where you can connect with things that are invisible, but more than anything, it's the energy of the shaman. What do you want to do with this energy? Do you want to manifest something over this period of time? This is a very powerful day for that.
Which is why I found it fascinating when we put the pieces together and saw that this sort of magic moment, the Black Moon Lilith flashpoint, which is not really a planetary conjunction. It's just it's a focal point through which can be used. But again, it's very much in the tradition of magic and manifestation, and it's on the day of the white wizard. So read into that what you will, but definitely it's something that can be worked with. So the very final aspect of this wave spell is on day 13, which is a day of transcendence, and it's when Jupiter conjuncts Uranus at 21 degrees. Now, there are many things to say about this, and perhaps there are better astrologers out there to listen to. But what I am understanding from this, that this is a moment of possibly seismic activity, could even be in the Earth, but also within our own personal worlds. But it could also be a moment of an expansion in consciousness, almost like a lightning bolt to the psyche, but full expansion with the energy of Jupiter. But it's also going to be quite grounded because it's in Taurus, and it's going to be quite earthy. So I think that this is a potential for a moment of awakening, particularly because it's day 13 of this wave spell. It speaks to me of an awakening of the heart, and maybe a full awakening of the heart is going to awaken the 5D consciousness. And if we can navigate the 13 days as part of maybe even the 40 days that we talked about earlier, from the eclipse to this point, I would say this is a great point for a marker in the sand for us to see how much of our inner work have we done. Have we navigated maybe some of the chaos and discord in the world? Maybe that's going to happen. Maybe the light is going to transmute all of it. Maybe we can say there needs to be a little bit of chaos and discord because many of the masses still need to be woken up. Many people are still living in illusion and delusion, particularly about the last 4 to 5 years, but about reality in general, about the governmental structures and organizations in our world. In fact, the general structures and organizations in our world, the healthcare system, the financial system, the education system, the monarchy, all of these imposed structures that we really don't seem to have an awful lot of say in, but somehow do need to be transformed. Maybe many of you out there have ideas about how you can assist in that transformation. And for sure, what I've observed over the last 10 years in the shift since 2012, as that energy started to take hold for many of us, is that we all have different roles to perform, and each role is super, super important. Some of us have been warriors on the front line, paving the way. Some of you have been doing the healing work. Some of you out there may be shepherds to help some of the masses to a certain point where they start to wake up, because not everybody's going to wake up at the same time. However, what we can ask for now with the eclipse is that more people wake up more quickly. And that means waking up to being multidimensional, which also means waking up to the things in your astral body, your emotional body, which is why I believe we're getting this kind of invitation from the sun with Chiron to cleanse our fields, to transmute and not allow back in the shadow frequencies, the density forces, because if we do, they're going to start to be painful, actually, I think, in the physical body. So this is how I'm understanding the end of this wave spell, Bella. And
that's the last day of the wave spell. It's the day of transcendence and presence. It looks to me as if there is going to be a collective awakening. And this is the day we transcend all of this information. And with that conjunction, it's like paradigm shattering. So maybe many revelations and
revolutions even.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm looking over my notes for this day. And what I've got here is revolution, rebellion, maybe electrification of ourselves. We are electromagnetic beings, of course, with so much water in us. And I think this is an opportunity to leap into the quantum world. And when we start to do that, we can see the illusion of the matrix, of the old paradigm. And then the question becomes, well, why do I still want to live with that and accept it and even condone it? That is something abhorrent to my soul. And I think if that happens to enough people during this wave spell, we will start to see literally the structures of the old paradigm being torn down. Hopefully in a not too aggressive way. We don't want bloodshed or too much chaos, but at some ending points, there is always this moment of, we can say, collapse. And I've been seeing now in the astral planes for the last couple of months, like this kind of weird imagery of almost a Manhattan skyline, we can say, of all of these shiny buildings that create, you know, one of those typical silhouettes of a city. But now they're all sort of crumbled, or at least they were crumbling, there were bits missing. And then I'd say about a month ago, I saw them all collapse down to the ground. And then what I saw was lots of rats scurrying everywhere as they tried to flee the collapse. Now, again, lots of symbology. And so we come to the final part of today's show, which is looking at our suggested plants. Now, to be honest, there are lots of plants that we could suggest right now, but in line with how we like to do this, right, Bella, we wanted to choose some plants that we feel are connected to the wave spell, but also connected to the energy of the moment. And so we've gone to one of our old favorites here, right?
Right. To get us into our heart, we work a lot with hawthorn and with the next plant, which is cacao. So just a reminder of sending out those feelings of love, of compassion, of Christ consciousness. If you don't know what Christ consciousness is, it is just about being in your heart and being more 5D and having a collective mind, which is always thinking on the highest good for everybody.
And, you know, we are coming into hawthorn berry season. It's still a little early, and with the weather that many countries in the Northern Hemisphere have been experiencing, it may be a little later this year. But traditionally, Bealtaine or Beltane, May the 1st, is the day of the hawthorn fairy queen, the May Queen. And normally it's the time when we see the flower blossoms, not the berries. The berries come much later, of course. But normally across the beautiful hills and mountains of Wales, when the hawthorn comes into blossom, it's just the most incredible scene, because you will see this shot white effect across many mountains, and there are thousands and thousands of beautiful old hawthorn trees in Wales. But there are indeed in many places, and there are many different species. In fact, here in Mexico, we've discovered a whole handful of different ones. But you know, if you start to see the blossoms coming up, definitely go out and talk to the hawthorn tree, talk to the beautiful fairy queen, and connect with the heart medicine. This is a medicine of the heart. It's also connected very much to the blood, hence the red berries. But really, when we're in our heart, we're connecting to that Christ consciousness, that also the consciousness of the goddess. Really, the fifth dimension is the world of unconditional love and creativity. And I've said it before, but I do believe that heaven is really the fifth dimension. It's the place where everything is okay, and it's the kind of the bridge, I would say, into samsara, into the more dense 3D world, but also through the emotional realms of the 4D, but also the bridge into the higher dimensional realms of 6, 7, 8th dimensional consciousness, which connects us into much more refined aspects of
there
ourselves.
is no duality.
Where there is no duality, exactly. But here in the 5th dimension, we can still observe duality, because we can observe it from within duality. I think that's the wonderful thing about, certainly from my perspective, being a Skywalker, is that there's that sort of, you can have a conversation with different parts of yourself. And we did focus this plant last month, right?
But yes, but it's one of my favorites. I don't know what we do without cacao. We use it a lot.
That's a way of saying we like chocolate.
Yes, we love chocolate. But it's also about connecting with it and what it does to our heart, the warm feeling of love. It's what it helps us do.
There is something really heart-enriching about cacao, and a good hot chocolate in the evening is definitely something that we've been enjoying over the last few weeks to lift our spirits through some tougher moments. The energies of the last few weeks have been difficult, and particularly with surgery and everything, there's been a few low moments. So it's a way of lifting, and of course, we want to try and use the best quality chocolate that we can. But also another wonderful way to get energy, as we shared before, is to get hold of some of the cacao beans, to break them open, and to munch on those for energy, which is something that we talked a lot about during the Quest of the Quantum Heart, which we did last year on QPH. But wonderful, wonderful medicine, wonderful to make a hot chocolate with. And I think the more that we can stay on our heart, we can even actually mix a little bit of hawthorn powder in with our hot chocolates.
I've been mixing it with turmeric for your bone healing as well.
Right, wonderful. And turmeric is also another wonderful plant, but perhaps one for a different WaveSpell. Now, we are going to introduce an old friend here right at the end. We could probably introduce him for every WaveSpell, and certainly many of our tribe members will chuckle when they see our old friend El Dandeliero, Dionte de Leon, or the wonderful dandelion. So why have we stuck dandelion here on the end, Bella?
Because of this important timing that is coming with the 8th of April. There are a series of portals that we need to be paying attention to, but more than anything, to be very, very present, to be very much in our hearts, and to be paying attention. Because this is the time where I feel humanity can finally reclaim the earth, the new earth, and our new reality, which is good for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that also what you're saying really is just reminding me that we're reclaiming time.
Time for sure.
We're reclaiming our sense of time. We're reclaiming time back from the imposed structures that we've kept us really in a place of slavery, if we're honest. The old Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, live for the weekend, feel like shit until you go back to work on Monday. That's been the premise and probably the structure for most Northern Europeans, Northern Hemisphere people for the last almost 100 years, we can say. Or, you know,
remember the quote, who owns your time owns your mind. So you're not going to be able to create your reality then.
And we have the wonderful dandelion clock here, which is another way of setting intentions, blowing prayers, or we can say wishes on the wind, and
freedom and love.
Right. So you know what could be really beautiful, Bella, is to find a dandelion seed head, which very much should be now coming into prominence in particularly the Northern Hemisphere. But I suggest probably in most parts of the world, and to blow one of those with the fullest intentions ahead of time, but to be activated on the eclipse. Now, some people have been saying, should I stay inside on the eclipse? Should I go outside? My personal view, and maybe Bella has one too, we haven't talked about this so much, but my personal view is I'm going to stay inside. I feel that perhaps for some energetic reasons, it's safer to hold space. I'm definitely going to be holding space for those 4.5 minutes, but also probably for an hour or two either side. And Bella, what about you?
Yeah, I'm also staying inside, in connection with the oaks, but not out or not surrounded by lots of people.
And that may depend on where you are, particularly if you're in the crosshairs, we can say, of the eclipse path, because it also links back to the eclipse of last year in October. And maybe if you're in that eclipse path, maybe I would suggest it's more important to stay inside. But everyone takes their chances and makes their choices, and we don't know for sure, but that's what we're going to be doing. But also the other great thing about dandelion is that it's a great cleanser, particularly of the liver. So if we still are carrying any anger that may start to get triggered by some of the more fiery energies of Eris and Aries, and also Mars having a little bit of a set to with his pops, Saturn in Pisces, then we might want to be taking some dandelion just to say, I normally would have got angry about that, but I think I'm just going to take a step back, breathe deeply, and say, let's talk about this another time when maybe the energy is more calm and I'm in a better space, more settled. And what's the song that we've been singing around the house the last week that's been causing us amusement?
You do it to yourself. Is now the mantra.
You do it to
Remember,
yourself.
you do it to yourself. It's not other people.
And that's what really hurts.
That's what really hurts.
And I remember Archangel Michael telling me the same thing in 2020. Davyd, you do realize everything that's happening to you is you doing it to you, right? And I was just like, sure, boss, but that can't be right, surely, because I'm pretty sure it's him over there that's doing that. He's getting me out of shape. It's like, well, yeah, he's the mirror, but it's you getting out of shape, buddy. Like, oh my God, you're right. So you do it to yourself. And that's what really hurts, because it's like, oh my God, that's true. And that can take a bit of swallowing. But Bella, tell us about what you've been up to over this last 2 weeks.
Yes, I've been really busy. The course has finally been released. It's in quantumplanet.world. It's a series of modules, 6 modules that are pre-recorded. We have already released 2 or 3, but module 4 is already recorded too. Really good feedback. We go into ancient calendars. We talk about all the different Mayan calendars. Remember, there were 17, but we go into the 3 major ones. People learn to read the Solkin, each archetype, each tone, and then how to read their own galactic signature, how to read the wave spells. So it's been fun. It's been really fun. And actually, the 3rd module is going to be released on the day of the eclipse, and it's going to be about galactic and planetary influences. But just to re-emphasize a question that often comes up from people, these are all pre-recorded modules. These courses can be done at any time, same as Stellar Nations, the same as the Geomancy, and indeed like most of the plant immersions on QPH. But there will be some live calls normally dotted in and around these. So the first live call, Bella, is coming up for this course on... The first one is on the 13th of April. So if you want to be part of the live call, you can still join. And even if you can't make that live call, it will also be recorded and added into the group. And Bella's creating a community now on QPW on quantumplanet.world around mind, time, and magic. And also, Bella, you offer the opportunity, you said earlier, about people coming to you for consultations, right? Oh, right. Yes. I'm still doing some readings, just a couple of a week, where we read your galactic signature, your archetype, your oracle, the wave spell of your birth, and what can you do with it, when is it coming next, so you can prepare for your activation or galactivation. Cool. And I know that the people who've been having those sessions with you are already making huge leaps in their understanding about themselves. And, you know, we spent a long time doing work with the plants on quantum plant healing, which is really important about cleansing the field, getting aware of our energy fields. But what we're doing on Quantum Planet World and what Quantum Compass is doing is bridging the 2 sites, the 2 platforms, but also the 2 worlds, because we're moving into a more quantum space about ourselves, looking at energies rather than perhaps things in the physical space. So the Mayan Time and Magic course, and also in conjunction with the Stellar Nations pathway, this is really an exploration of much more cosmic forces and how our soul, which is a very galactic aspect of us, is transcending and traversing, we can say, all of those spaces. And me and Bella have been having some fun actually on the commentaries. The modules are very beautifully presented, very tight. The information is very precise, but on the commentaries we get to explore a bit more
of
Go
our
far
fun.
out.
So we got a bit more far out. We got a little bit more rabbit hole. And especially for those of you that have been following us for a while, you know that we have some pretty far out thoughts, but also they're backed up by other people's work, particularly the wonderful Jose Arguez, who definitely is someone that we have a lot of respect for and feel energetically connected to in these times, because he's been very much part of the pathway to understand all of this. And so we have these wonderful humans who are often channeling avatar beings.
We went into avatars as well during the
Right.
course, the different avatars that have come. We talked about Pakal Votan, which is one of the avatars from the Mayans. We talked about Buddha.
Right, and we all actually have the capacity to channel avatars, not least of all the amazing avatar that is our higher self, or possibly even our future self. And these are all head-bending thoughts, but they're all worth meditating on, because once we start to break down the illusion of linear time, we understand that we are multidimensional beings having an incredibly psychedelic, multidimensional experience here in a 3D body, which is mind-blowing. It's one of the most mind-blowing thoughts you can have, and I've sat with it for a long time, and it still blows my mind, and continues to do ever more so with the information that Bella is bringing through, what we're seeing in the astrology, and how we're putting all of this together into the cosmology of the stellar nation. So again, gratitude to our friend and teacher Leslie, who's helping to put some of the pieces together, because the two things are really fitting side by side, right, Bella? And as we come to the end of this episode, do you want to share anything more? What's beyond this wave spell, or do you feel like we've covered everything?
I think we've given a lot of information already, but the essence of it all is just be in your heart, have good thoughts, be coherent with yourself, what you think, what you say, what you want to create in the world. And it seems like a very good opportunity for humanity to have a jump, an evolutionary jump. So let's try to do it all together.
It's what we all showed up for, everybody. I think that this is really the reason we're all here, and if not now, then when? Humanity has been kicking the proverbial can down the cul-de-sac road for a while now, and then we've hit the wall at the end of the cul-de-sac. There is nowhere else to go except, as we say, as above, so below, as within, so without. And I think that this is what this eclipse and this wave spell is all about. It's about setting the metronome for a new reality, a new sense of time, and the revelation, dissolution, and dissolving of the old paradigm in the old anti-grid or matrix, or however you wish to refer to that. And for sure, there are many inverted structures now that need to fall. And with collective intention, we can do that with beautiful light from the high dimensional beings who are literally surrounding planet Earth right now, and even present on planet Earth. But we have to invite them in. That is part of the agreement. We have to give conscious awareness, even to the archangels. They will not come into our space and assist us unless we invite them in. And that is a really important thing to remember, because the more we open our hearts and the more we can perceive those types of lights, especially from the photon belt that we're passing through at the moment, the more light we bring into ourselves. And the more that we all do that, the more our planet will be filled with light. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Bella, for putting the WaveSpell together, and for the wonderful Mayan Time and Magicals, which I absolutely recommend. It's I think it's going to be paradigm changing in its own way. And it's also causing me to think about many interesting things from history, or his story, and what really happened. So we can have a lot of fun with this, everybody. It is very creative. I think it's what's being called for. I think our higher minds are wanting us to explore more of reality, more of ourselves. And as the energy of Jupiter in Taurus continues to expand, I think we can do it from the ground up. And that means that we can create heaven here on Earth. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you all again very shortly for another episode of the Quantum Compass. Ciao for now.
Take care.